Now, okay, he gets eaten up. He generally gets eaten up before he gets to the bottom, or well worked over. There's all sorts of things ready to dump on dead creatures, whether they be on land or in sea. Not just the vultures and the other things we think of, but the ants and the worms and the maggots and all of them. They go to town on anything that dies. Now the fish, if he does make it, he doesn't go up, he goes down. He goes to the bottom. In 3 days, the gases start to form generally if the water temperature is right, and eventually he will come to the top if he doesn't get eaten on the bottom by bottom feeders. Now, if he lasts long enough on the bottom, he will come to the top and get eaten by a surface feeder. And if he doesn't get eaten eventually by a surface feeder, he'll blow to ashore. And when he does, he's going to be eaten by a land creature. If he doesn't, the maggots and the ants and the worms are going to finish off what's left. But the one thing he will never be is a fossil. He is going to be a meal. Of course, Hamlet, Shakespeare had it right in the third act of Hamlet when he had just stabbed his future father-in-law. Good thing, I guess, to do when he just Polonius, the prime minister, and he said, "Who do we have here?" And out falls Polonius. And he picks him up. Polonius was in his mother's chamber, and he hauls Polonius out in the ante-room, and he goes in to see the king, and the king says, "Where is Polonius?" And he says, "If you shan't find him in a fortnight, you shall nose him in outer chamber." He said, "I didn't want riddles, you know." He says, "Where is Polonius?" He says, "He's at dinner." "Oh, not where he eats, but where he is eaten. We're all but worms upon our only emperor. We are all but at dinner for our only emperor, the worm." That's the way a king gets profuse to the guts of a beggar. Right? Anyway, that was scientific observation. Shakespeare was a bit of a scientist. Now, what is the interesting thing about the fossils in our fossil record? By trillions that we have observed, cataloged over 5 billion of them, all of our fossils have one very peculiar attribute. They haven't been eaten on. They were buried alive, struggling, fighting with their flesh on, and nothing ate on them. There is no ants, maggots, worms, vultures have had any gnaw marks. Now, why? Second, how do they all get buried? They had to get buried at once. Something had to cover them and encase them and preserve them. That means that they had to be encased and preserved in a matter of minutes or hours. Not in ages, because anything in ages will decay and rot and blow away. It becomes dust. It does not become fossils. You go out here and fall down in a field and die, and nobody finds you, you will never be found. You are going to blow away. The dust of your ancestors blow in your face every day. They do not become fossils. Okay? A fossil is a peculiar phenomenon buried in silt instantly and encased in silica. All right? This is known as a flood. A universal, not golf ball size, not sitting on top of a mountain, but a universal flood. Next, let's look at the glaciers. All the glaciers in the world are in the process of receding. We see no glaciers generating. We have no evidence of any ice ages, but of a ice age, which I think came from the flood and is still receding. And, well, we could get into that. That's a whole other subject. Let's just drop out of that. Now, the fact of the universality of flood, marine animals in the highest mountains, here on the top of the Alps, on the top of the Andes, what do you find? Marine fossils. You've got some problems with that sort of thing. With a local flood, by the way. Doesn't quite answer. You ever seen a local flood on the top of a mountain? Well, that's a peculiar phenomenon. Certainly hard to observe and even to imagine. Now, we could have fun with them all day long. Well, I think we give enough to that. Let's now polish off the mutations. The evolutionists want to state that a mutation, and a mutation is the smallest change within a human cell or within a living cell, is known as a mutation. Any alteration. Let's take a look at a single cell. You're made up of them, everything else is made up of these cells. This cell is not just a little jelly ball. is quite an interesting and a very intricate gadget. And here's a bunch of things called DNA. Now, DNA produces something called RNA. Now, I may not be the greatest scientist, I haven't got all this figured out. The RNA produces these enzymes that I told you about. Oh, from 1 to 600,000 enzymes per cell. Let's just put down a little 100,000 enzymes. That's all we got in there. Now, without enzymes, there cannot be any DNA. Enzymes are essential for the existence of DNA. Now, there can't be any RNA that wasn't produced by DNA, and there can't be any enzymes without RNA. Now, all of them had to be there at the same time, or none of it could be there at all. All of this is wrapped in a membrane that gets its food by a process of osmosis, which we don't understand at all, because we have never seen a living cell. Did you know that? Because the time you open a living cell, it's not living, it's dead. All we have seen is dead cells, but dead cells do not give a protein spectrum. But living cells do not give a protein spectrum. It isn't until a cell dies that it becomes protein. Now, next thing is, a living cell must ingest protein. It has to live on protein. Without protein, no cell can live. Next, there is no protein known in the universe except produced by living cells. Now, with no protein except produced by living cells, and no living cell can exist without protein, how did that first cell live? You got a wee bit of a problem. You know what the answer of our scientists is? It came from outer space. Okay? How did it get in outer space, mister? We don't know. That's where you were in the first place. Why didn't you just stay in the beginning? Why waste this all the way down to the end of this line to find out you don't know what you're talking about? You know, we could have saved the whole thing by just starting that in the very beginning of the thing. You don't know. Now, if you don't know, why don't you shut up? Now, this whole thing had to come in existence at once. This is not a little glob. It's a very, very complicated organism. So complicated, we have no way to even comprehend it or understand it. Why? Because each of these cells, though the same, are all different. Some we see with, some are nerves, some are muscles, some are blood. Some are all sorts of things, and they all do different things, yet they're all cells built the same way. How? We don't know. In fact, we know more about life today than was known 5,000 years ago. It is as much of a mystery today as it ever was. Why? We can't even observe it. Because when we observe it, it's dead. You can't observe it while it's living. Because this is the living matter. Now, the mutation theory is that there are changes. Obviously, there are changes. And there are. What is the aging process? What causes you to get older? Mutations. What is a mutation? A mutation is a change, an accidental change. Now, what is in a highly complex structure, a highly organized structure, what does an accidental change do? Does it organize it or disorganize it? Pardon? Disorganize it. Then, therefore, we're not talking about evolution, but devolution. If an accidental change causes disorganization in an organized structure, then with a breakdown, a decay of the structure, it is not an improvement of the structure. Next, in all scientific observation, no one has yet ever observed an organizing mutation. We have observed disorganizing mutations, right, by the trillions and billions. We call them deformations and so forth of youth, or what do you call them? Defects. And the defects get worse and worse as your eyes get weaker and weaker and the glasses get thicker and thicker and all the other things, and the breath gets shorter and shorter. What is it? These are mutations. These are accidental changes taking place within the cell. It appears scientifically that these changes are caused by radiation. And by the way, this is one reason why people get heavy suntans get skin cancer. What is cancer? It is a decay process going on, mutations within the cell. And when they get rampant, you now have a kind of rapid decay. And this is why the sun and the radiation, well, we can get in a whole other subject I might have to do later, but privately. Okay, if that's happening to the cell, what do they say? This is the claim of the evolutionist. Out of 1 million mutations, surely one accidentally must be organizing. Now, they've never seen one, but they say there must be one. Okay, I'm going to give them a freezy. I'm going to give them one with no argument. Let me give them 1 out of 1 million organizing mutations. And 999,999 disorganizing mutations, and you're telling me we're evolving? Now that's pretty stupid. Okay, let's give them 1 out of a million mutations with no disorganizing mutations. 1 out of a million cell creations have a mutation that organizes, evolving. I'm going to give them straight evolution, and it even becomes more absurd. Why? If we take the number of mutations that it would require 1 out of a million, this means we have a horse and he has mutation. But we had to have 1 million horses to get the one mutation, all right? Now, to get our second mutation, the next 1 million horses you'll get a mutation, but it won't be in a horse that had the first mutation, unless it was of the parent of the one horse that had the first mutation, not of the horses of the other 999,999 horses, because they won't count. A mutation in there doesn't count. To get 2 mutations in the horse, we have to have 1 million times 1 million horses. We have to have 1 billion horses to get 2 mutations. Now, to get 3 mutations, just 3, we have to have 1 million billions for 3 mutations. If we take the number of cells within a horse, we have to have 3,000 times as many horses as there are atoms known in the entire universe. Now I want to tell you, that's a lot of horses. Yes.
Just to argue the point, how about if you had one horse with 200 million sperm cells and you had a 1 mutation in 1 sperm cell?
All right. But we have all of these other 999,000 horses also having horses, which didn't have that. That's the problem. I'm not just talking about the line of the horse that did mutate a horse. I'm talking about all the other ancestors that also had to be repeated. They weren't horses, obviously. They were this, whatever it was, ancestors of horses. But we have to have 1 million of those that did not have that. If you're going to grant 1 in a million, which they granted, right, to begin with. So that's what we started with, right? Therefore, for every mutation, we have to have 1 million times the species of the last generation to get 1 more in that same line. Because there's only 1 of the lines of all of these that's going to count to our final horse. Now we got some other problems. Why do the fossil records have no horses? Or no ancestor to horses? Why does the fossil record only contain extinct species, like the passenger pigeon went out here 1920? We have in this world today about 2 species per year that are going out of existence. The number of species in the world are declining quite rapidly, and it appears that today we have about half the species that existed at the time of the flood. The fossil record shows double the species that we have today. Yet we do not find any new species ever coming into existence that aren't just like they were in the fossil record. We find no evidence of any evolution in the species that are in the fossil record. We find species like dinosaurs that did disappear. But we do not find any new ones come into existence. Evolution requires new ones, not extinct ones. That's still devolution, not evolution. You got a problem. You go back in the coal mines and you find squirrels, exactly like today, in the coal. Rabbits. Exactly like. You have a lump of coal over here in Indiana, a woman carrying to her stove in 1890, dropped the coal, and there's a chain, gold chain between the 2 lumps of coal, the pieces that they broke. You got some problems with such things. Now, how did the trees get all in one place? The amount of coal in the world today is about equal to the amount of wood that's on the world at one time. How did it get hauled in one place and buried? How long does it take to make coal? Millions of years, doesn't it? How long does it take to make coal? Anybody here know? Pardon? Just seconds. No time at all. All I got to do is put a piece of wood here and put enough dirt on top and I got coal. Pressure is what makes coal. Nothing to do with age. In fact, the center of pilings become coal in the driving when you're driving them in hard ground with a pile driver. Whole pilings in Norway become solid coal in 100 years. Now, we're given this age phony baloney. Do we find oil becoming created today? No. It's by marine life and animal life that was buried beneath the earth. How to get buried beneath the earth and get trapped like that? It isn't happening today. How did that coal get washed up, stored, the wood, and buried at one time without rotting? It took some, they didn't do it with Caterpillar tractors. It took some force to dig it up, haul it around, and dump it and bury it. Can you tell me of any force besides a flood that could do it? If you put a little dirt on top of trees, what do you get? Peat. Where do you find peat? Is peat young coal? No, it's not young coal. It's coal with not much dirt on it. If you get a few hundred feet of dirt on a coal, what do you get? Bituminous. Oh, bituminous is middle-aged coal. No, it's not middle-aged coal. It's middle-deep coal. Now, when you find anthracite, is it old coal? No, it's coal under a mountain. It's got a lot of rock on top. And when you go down deep for coal, you get anthracite. Now, if you take a peat bog and put a mountain on top, you'll have anthracite now. It doesn't take time. It just takes mountains. That's all. That's why you go to the mountains to get anthracite, and you go out here in Illinois and dig up bituminous when strip mining. Now, any idiot could figure that out unless he was an evolutionist and had his brain blown. So he can't come up with such conclusions. Once he's an evolutionist, because he cannot observe right, because his mind has already been tilted. All right? Now, see, we're both looking at the same phenomenon, coal. But the question is, what do you see when you see the coal? What I see is a flood poured a whole bunch of dirt on top of a bunch of trees. It ripped up and deposited on the shore when it was receding. And it buried it. Next, come up with another one. You don't like that one. You got some problems. You got some problems with oil. In fact, you got problems with everything. If you don't buy it. For an example, I'll show you another one. This is nothing out of a textbook. This is just old Crane noodling away, sitting in the backyard sometime. You know, thinking is a rare occupation nowadays. We read things and find out things by reading other people, don't we? What's wrong with, kind of doing a little snoodling? I'm sitting there in the backyard, and I'm just sitting there thinking. I got a few pieces of fact, or at least given to me. That is, our Earth is being bombarded by 24 million meteorites a day. The size of the moon, it should be being hit by 6 million meteorites a day, if the Earth is being hit by 24 million meteorites a day, right? Now, the Earth has an atmosphere that burns up most of them before they strike the surface. But the moon has no atmosphere. It means those meteorites strike the moon surface without any burning up, with full impact. This means that they must abrade and eat away the surface of the moon. This means that in billions of years, or even millions of years, the moon must be polished. And this is, by the way, the theories that have been advanced by scientists before we went to the moon, that the moon had to be at least 50 feet deep in solid dust, because there is no water, no rain, no weather, no wind, no atmosphere to collect or move by tidal or any other action and reform mountains. Therefore, the moon must be a smooth ball of dust, as the rocks are eroded away by 6 million meteorites a day. Year after year, millennium after millennium, million years after million years, by billions of years, the moon must be a solid ball of powder about the consistency of the confectioner's sugar. Now, I look with my little monocular. I lost an eye as a little child, so I buy only half a binocular. I buy a monocular. And I look at my monocular, and I can see the mountain ranges on the moon. Now, that's not possible. If that rock those astronauts were looking at had been sitting out there 4 billion years, it's not there. 4 billion years is a long, long time. Now we got some problems. When the first two astronauts got off of the spaceship, that God already told you the name of it in Obadiah, the 4th verse, right? Do I exalt thyself as the eagle and make thy nest amongst the stars? The only place in the Bible talking about anything, the eagle being in space amongst the stars, extraterrestrial. All right? There's nothing else in the Bible talking about extraterrestrial. Terrestrial being extraterrestrial. So to exalt thyself as the eagle and make thy nest amongst the stars, I'll bring thee down, saith the Lord. What was the name of the landing module? The eagle. That's pretty good. 2,500 years in advance. Can't beat that for calling them, is it? Anyway, and I told my brother that before I went up. He was unconverted, and I was. And I said, no, the United States is going to be to the moon. He said, no, Russia's going to get first. They're going to have Russia go first. And I said, no, we'll go first. He said, why? I said, because Obadiah. He said, don't give me that Bible bit. And I said, yes, Obadiah, the 4th verse. Make thy exalt thyself as the eagle and make thy nest amongst the stars. No place else in the Bible. It says the eagle, and Russia is the bear. We are the eagle. I didn't know they were going to name the module, and that day I picked up the phone to call him up, and he said, shut up! How's that for shooting it, boy? That's pretty close. You can't miss on those ones, can you? Well, anyway, you know, that first guy, Armstrong, he comes down that ladder very carefully. They had the big pads on so they wouldn't sink in the deep, deep dust. And he putting his foot down real gingerly, and he was touching very carefully, and he spent a long time getting off that ladder. And the other guy walks down, He jumps off. He says, what's wrong? It's very easy. He jumped up and jumped back down, the waiting list. Yeah, but he had already seen Armstrong get off. Armstrong had to get off on what they believed was going to be 50 feet of dust. And what was the first thing Armstrong said? It's only ½ inch deep. They just lost billions of years. Gone. Those poor guys. It must be really tough on them to have to keep playing that Mickey Mouse game. Question: why is it so important that this is drilled home to everybody, and that any contrary information or opinions or observations are silenced and not put it anywhere in our universities of honest inquiry into wisdom and knowledge of our universe? It is not because of scientific purposes. It is because of its political, spiritual, and economic ramifications. If this is true, evolution is true, then progress is caused by control of the ecology, by the control of the environment, which is the control of people, society, its organizations, and its beliefs, its wishes and desires. We must control what people believe, what they think, what they love, what they do, what they spend, what they consume, every facet of their life must be controlled. For if we can control the environment, then we can create progress. All socialism is based on evolution. Without evolution, all socialistic logic falls flat on its face. With it, they don't even have to explain it. It's already assumed. It is the basis of all dictatorship. And you watch as our people were changed in the last century from a belief in divine, absolute God, creating Lord of the universe, who all power was in his hands, to a God who only sit back and permits certain things kind of to happen. He's a willy-nilly little non-Lord ruling God. That's what happened to the Christian church. What happened to the non-Christians? And what was the assault? The assault was led by the assault on who caused it all, by whose will, and who is sovereign, whose will be done. Once that is established, all other philosophies, political thought, have swept away. When a people believed in an absolute, sovereign, divine, ruling God, they could not be ruled by men. When they believed in a passive, permissive, or not really known God, not real God, not a reality, but a vague deist, a prime cause, some regional force, unknown, or we can't determine or know anything about him, he just is, or whatever he does, cannot be determined or known by men, you'll have the total chaos that happened in England in the 17th century when they swept away deism, and happened to America in the 20th century. And what do you turn to now? From the wisdom of God to the wisdom of men. For man, God no longer is the determinant. It is man who's going to determine and plan the environment and control the evolution, control society. And it all hinges on who is the creator. Is it accident, or is it a sovereign divine God? You cannot ever hope to possibly alter the political and economic system or direction in which this nation is coming until you alter in the people's heart and mind the nature of their God. America did not know freedom and independence and prosperity because they had figured out some new economic system. It was because they knew of a divine, all-powerful God and had full faith and trust in him, or at least enough did, that it was the dominant force in society. Even the non-Christian had to live a Christian life in the community 100 years ago, or he was in trouble. It was the Christians who set the law, the pattern, the politics, the economics. It was the Christian that was the driving force within our country. Today, the Christian is not a force, because by and large, the Christians do not have a true, sovereign, all-powerful, creating God, whose will shall be done and shall endure forever. Vengeance is his, and he has all things in his hand. This is not the God known by most professing Christians today. And that is why it is no longer a force. And therefore, the force of belief in accident and of human will and human creation, of human society, has become the basic religion. And therefore, they turn to men to take care of their needs when they're sick, called Medicare. Or when they're out of work, they turn to the government to solve their problems. They turn to the government to solve their educational problems, the pollution problems, the population problems, every problem. We do not look anymore to a sovereign God because we don't really believe as a people that God really can do what he said he could do. We believe the government can. We don't believe that God can. And so we have the society which is a result of such a belief. The society and what's happening in our country today is inevitable. When a religion has been transformed into the religion that is basically believed by our people today. It is not caused by Nixon's. It is not caused by the people in the State Department. It is not caused by our political leaders. It is caused by a complete transformation into the nature of God and the nature of the work of the Lord Jesus Christ on the cross. This is the whole heart wolf. But the key of the wedge is evolution. Thank you very much. We'll close with that. How'd I do?
15 minutes.
Well, we'll take some questions. I'll stay around. I'll just leave.
Why don't you use the mic and go ahead and answer some questions?
All right, somebody wants to ask a question or two, we'll put it on. I don't know how hot you are. I'm hot. I'm doing all the work. Maybe you're doing work too. Particularly if this is... is there any questions on it? Yes. Go ahead. I only have one eye. If I don't look like I'm looking at it, that's why I point. I know point is improper, but I got to do it. No.
I was talking to a fellow who had a recent couple of college physics courses, and he says the carbon-14 dating system is out of date. Now they use oxygen-18.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other part of the question was, he says that the second law of thermodynamics does not hold in nuclear reaction.
Doesn't? In other words, he's got something out of a nuclear reaction that wasn't there, or something that was there that turned out to be nothing?
Well, I didn't...
Oh, they can split atoms, it's true, but they still got the split. No, that is still true, a nuclear reaction. He doesn't know what he's talking about, to put it quite bluntly. And by the way, the carbon-14, one other thing, since we do have a few minutes, let me tack this one on. Carbon-14 is an interesting one because we know the rate in which carbon-14 is being formed in our atmosphere by the action of the sun. There's no reason to believe that this has ever changed. At least uniformitarianism would hold that it has always been formed at that rate. Now, second thing is, carbon-14 falls out of our atmosphere relative to the quantity in the atmosphere. As the quantity is greater, the fallout rate is greater. All right? Therefore, as carbon-14 continues to be increased from the time which no carbon-14, that is at creation, let's assume there's no carbon-14 in our atmosphere, the sun would produce it at a constant rate. But the fallout would ever be increasing as the quantity increased, until you reach a point that the fallout is equal to the rate of creation. That's called a point of stabilization, at which time carbon-14 should stabilize in the atmosphere and stay the same. The period of time for carbon-14 stabilization is 28,000 years. That is, you started with no carbon-14. At the end of 28,000 years, the concentration of carbon-14 in the atmosphere would cause a fallout to be equal to the rate of its creation. Now, you got a problem. It hasn't stabilized yet. Now, that's a real flipper for the carbon-14 boys, because that's much better than half-lives, because the amount of ingestion is variable. But this is not the case of its creation and fallout rate. That's determinable. Carbon-14 quantity in our atmosphere would indicate about a 10,000 year, 10 to 12,000 year period of time of its formation. Assuming uniformitarianism. All right? I have to make that qualification. Assuming uniformitarianism. Hanging them on their own assumption. They got some real problems. And isn't it interesting that they take the thing which should be the biggest problem and try to turn it around into an asset? Now, that's a real flip if you ever want to see one. In fact, in every area, every single area, we could actually be up here for weeks and months and months and months, because in every single observation you come up with these. I wish I had all my slides. I got a whole pile of pictures that I flip on there, and which well, I'll give you a couple of them. I have in the pictures while I'm thinking about it. I didn't do today. Down here in the Black Sea riverbed in Texas, there is for 400 miles footprints of human beings, which observed to be, we have today human beings 9 feet tall, and their feet fit in them, but they're big feet, they're bigger feet than we got anyway. But they're in the rock, see? But with them are running dinosaurs. For 400 miles of dinosaur footprints and people footprints all running together down that riverbed. Now that poses some real problems. You got another problem. Supposedly 80 million years ago, there was a creature called the trilobite, an ancestor of our insects. None have ever been found more than about 3 inches long. They're about that big, but most of them are smaller. Trilobite kind of looks like a little bat type of insect. Anyway, trilobites are found, one of the most prolific things in our fossil record are trilobites. They're all over the place. Now, there are no trilobites around now. We are told that these trilobites went out of existence some 80 million years ago. A man came around just a few 100,000 years ago. But one of the earliest creatures were trilobites. Here's a guy out in Idaho who's doing some prospecting. And he's taking home some shale, oil prospecting is what he's doing. And he gets home and he breaks open a piece of shale, and bam, there in the shale is a human footprint with a sandal on, stepping on a trilobite. Now you got a problem. Here inside the shale, a piece broken open is the human's footprint on a sandal, definite heel. A heel. Suppose the Romans invented it. Wait a minute. Then if the Romans invented it, this must be post-Roman trilobites. Because he's stepping on a trilobite. So he goes to the University of Idaho to show him his find, and they did the scientific thing. They refused to look at it. After going to 4 or 5 other universities, he finally got them to look at it, and they said, well, it looks like a human footprint and a human sandal stepping on a trilobite. But it must not be. It must be a giant trilobite on a smaller trilobite. Well, that giant trilobite was wearing a sandal. And it got some real problems with a sandal-shod trilobite. But anyway, now here's the scientist. This is the head of the American Geological Association saying it looks like a human footprint stepping on a trilobite. If it does, why isn't it? Now we got some other little ones. In granite, running all along the eastern Appalachian Mountains from Maine to Georgia, there are over 1,000 human footprints in the granite in pre-Cambrian rock. That is, rock before any life on Earth. Now these are human footprints in granite. You've got some problems with human footprint in granite. That granite had to be mud. You step on that granite today, it doesn't make footprints. They're in every state in the Appalachians. What did the head of the American Geological Society have to say about the human footprints in the granite? His answer to that little problem was this: if there is a human footprint in granite, every geologist must get a job as a truck driver. We're through. Well, he's got some problems. There are footprints in granite, over 1,000 of them in the Appalachians. What are you going to do with that little one? Record it, photograph, cast? While we're at it, we might as well go to the human beings, the skeletons too. I didn't do that, did I? Well, we got to go to the skeleton. I'm going to show you. Here's science. Science is a very funny thing. Most science is not scientific. We'll try to do a little scientific science. I want to show you. This is just to get some. I'm over at the Chicago Museum. And by the way, the Chicago Museum has now withdrawn all of its ancient skeletons because they are none of them are supportable, and they want to get out of the whole subject. They have now withdrawn them. But this is a few years ago before they withdrew them. They had a case down there, a very interesting case. In the case, they had a skeleton of a people. Then they had a skeleton of a gorilla and an orangutan and a gibbon and all of the monkeys and so forth, all the way down. Now, let's take a look. Here are all these skeletons standing in this case. what is our scientific fact? We have skeletons in a case. All right? And I will accept that this is a human skeleton again, but I'm not questioning the skeletons. I'm not questioning the fact. I'm questioning the conclusion that is stated on the little plate down below. It said, you see the similarity of the skeletons? This proves evolution. All right? A demonstration of evolution. Now, I see the same skeletons with a different set, and I say, see the skeleton similarity? It proves it cannot be evolution. It must be planned. Seeing they all follow the same plan, it must be following a plan. It means it must be a planner. If there was a planner, the planner had the ability to make them follow the plan. This is the ultimate proof of creation. Now notice, two people looking at the same fact. One says it proves evolution. The other says it proves creation. Well, obviously the similarity shows a universal plan. If accidental evolution is true, we should find all sorts of weird possible combinations of endo and exoskeletons, but we don't. We find them following a very definite blueprint. That says there's a blueprinter, doesn't it? See, what I'm talking about, the difference between a fact and a conclusion. We observe a fact. But the fact that they got a fact there doesn't prove the conclusion. Don't jump to the conclusion is right because the fact is right. Careful of your logic. Let's go through some of our great missing links. By the way, when we get the missing links, now let me handle this one in just about 2 minutes. The most important thing to remember about missing links is this. They're missing. All of the missing links are missing. We have no missing links. And they are properly named as missing links. They're not links, they're missing links. Now, evolution is based upon missing links. That is, facts that are not there. Show you, example. Between all of, we'll go to ratology. I'll take this right out of a modern science textbook that's in publication and used today in our schools. They will show you a picture of a rat, and they'll show you a process of that rat evolving into a bat. Okay? They'll show you the stages. Now notice some things about the stages. One, if you take a half-formed rat bat, the bat rat has a problem. He has half-formed wings, he can't fly, and he does not have legs to run on to forage, so he cannot live. Now, survival of the fittest says that no rat ever became a bat, because you cannot go through the bat rat stage to get from bat to rat. Now, true. Second, if bat ratism is true and uniformitarianism is true, where are our bat rats today? Now, we're not talking about a bat rat, but for every single stage of bat rat, of the thousands of mutations, we must have as many bat rats of each stage and type as we have either bats or rats. 3. Why don't all the rats become bats? Why do we still have rats and bats and no bat rats? Now, 4th, we don't have any bat rats in the fossil record, let alone in our fossils we have rats and bats, exactly as bats and rats are today, but not a single bat rat. Now, 5, we not only need bat rats, but we need to have missing links between every creature all the way back to the beginning. Yet we have no missing link, not just human missing link, but we don't have any missing link of any creatures. Now, 7, we have to have trillions of times as many missing links as links. That is, we should have no rats or bats, but we should have a myriad of bat rats, but things beyond bats. Why don't we have the bats evolving on to whatever they're going to evolve on to? And what about the things that are evolving into rats? Where are they? And what makes you think a bat is higher than a rat? Answer, if you pose this, the evolutionist takes a quick double shift and changes tactic, and he says, well, that isn't true. What happens is that a bat and a rat came from the same creature. A bat-rat ancestor that came into a bat and rat. Well, if that's the case, why didn't they come into any of the other possibilities of variation? Why only to a bat and only to a rat? 2, why is there no ancestors of bat rats today? If evolution is true in a continuing uniform process, we got to have an ancestor to bat rat making bats and rats today. Where is he? 3, why did they stop at rat and bat? You got a lot of problems. In fact, the problems are overwhelming. Bat ratism gives you some trouble. Now let's go to the human fossils. We got some human fossils that are interesting. For example, of course, it's easy to take Piltdown Man apart because Piltdown Man was a hoax. Some students played a hoax by taking a chimpanzee that died in the local circus, put a little acid and some filene and so forth, and buried it. Suppose this professor dug it up. Whether he was in on it or not, nobody's been able to determine. But now we know that the Piltdown Man is no more than 100 years old, which is not much of a missing link. 2, we have Nebraska Man. Nebraska Man was a man created out of a tooth. Now let's just take a look. You got a tooth, and you're going to come up with this whole man drawn in the science book, great with hair, skin color, the whole shoot match, walk and everything from a tooth. Now I want to tell you, there's got to be a lot of imagination go into a man created out of a tooth. How much of that was created as a religious image, and how much of it was science? The science was a tooth. The rest of it was strictly pagan religion. Could be nothing else. Next, after quite a few years, the tooth was reclassified as an extinct pig's tooth, not human at all. Now, 3, Africanus Man. This man was stumbled over by a guy walking down a path in Africa. He fell on his face, stumbled over a bone, which is supposed to be 1,000,000 years old. You know, how long do bones lay out in paths for 1,000,000 years? To be stumbled over. Now, he takes this, and the British Museum has this thing for 43 years. One of our ancestors, just the top of the cranial plate. Finally, one day, a guy is in there, and he says, "Say, fellas, I hate to tell you this, but you haven't got a cranial plate there." What do you mean we ain't got a cranial plate? They don't say it that way in England. They just say something else. I won't try my English accent. It's pretty bad. Anyway, he says, "I'll tell you what you got. You got an elephant's kneecap." What it proved to be was an elephant's kneecap. Now, I want to tell you, a science that cannot tell the difference between a human cranial plate and an elephant's kneecap is not a science that I'm going to put my eternal destiny on. I think that's a pretty weak hunk of stuff. Now, let's go to another man, Java Man. Java Man, Pythagoras Man, it's, I think, have we pronounced that? Yeah, never did get it straight. Okay. Well, we're never going to do it. Anyway. This man, a guy goes down to Java to find a missing link. He goes right down and paddles right back. That's pretty good going. You know, he walks up to a gravel bed and finds a missing link. Here he finds a piece of cranial plate, a small piece of thigh bone, and 2 or 3 teeth. Never established whether it was 2 or 3 teeth. Depends on which argument you want to go by. But anyway, he comes back with this little sack of bones, found 60 feet apart in a gravel bed, laying exposed in the open. Dated 1,000,000 years old. 60 feet apart. Put them together, we got one people. Okay? That's the one with the sheep over the shoulders in your science text with the long hair down the back. Right. That's done by a small piece of bone, a piece of thigh bone, which is believed to be animal, while the head of the other bone is believed to be human. And 2 or 3 teeth. The interesting thing about these bones, did he show them to the scientific community? No, he didn't. What he did is supposedly made plaster cast and sent them to the major universities of the world, but would let no one see his bones. It wasn't until he died that they looked at the bones, and the only thing we know is that the statement was made at the time was the bones he gave were not like the cast he sent. The bones have been locked up for the last 45 years in Vienna, and no one today is allowed to see the bones. Now that's your missing link